Hey everybody, I'm Deborah Richmond. Today we're going to look at a couple more quilts from my quilt collection, and this is one of them you see behind me. Now, I like to collect quilts that are unusual, that are non-traditional. Sometimes they are made from obvious beginners, or sometimes they have different elements that are just non-traditional. Many times these quilts, they're the quirky ones you see. Many times these quilts have something to teach us. In fact, the longer that you look at the quilt, the more you start to discover about it. You can learn a lot from these quilts as far as design elements. So let me just show you this one. This is a quilt that has 4 patches, you see here, and then it has one piece of fabric here. Now this one piece of fabric is very busy. It's a large print. In fact, from a distance, when you're looking at this quilt, the only contrast you're actually seeing are these green squares that are in this large print fabric. So this quilt has a couple of things to show us. First of all, let's talk about value. Value means the difference between light and dark. So when you're putting fabrics together for your quilt, you're often sorting them between lights and mediums and darks. So this is a quilt that doesn't have a lot of contrast between the values. Everything seems to be one. Very much nothing really pops out at you except these solid green squares that again inside a large print. So what you end up with is a quilt that your eye never stops. It just keeps trying, your brain is always trying to find the pattern, especially for us quilters, trying to find the pattern, trying to see where is this quilt going. And this one is often very confusing because your eye keeps picking up the dark squares that are jumping forward to you, and everything else is blending in with each other. A couple other things I know by looking at this quilt is that this was a quilter. This is put together very well, so there's no problems with construction. It's probably 60s or 70s. That's my best guess. I don't have a lot of experience dating fabrics, but that's my best guess. And it does look like some of these fabrics are probably from garments. So I see some shirting plaids. I see some prints, floral prints that could have been blouses or dresses. So that is my best guess that it's someone who does sew and also quilts, took all of her leftover pieces, took this large print that maybe she never had anything she wanted to put that in, because it is unusual, and put them all into a quilt. Now this quilt is a top only. It has not been quilted. So now let's look at another quilt. So you can see right away that we have kind of the same lesson going on with this quilt. I put these two together for a reason. They have the same issues. This is a quilt that is so generic as far as zero contrast and zero scale. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But I have to really outline the block for you because I'm pretty sure you can't see what the block is from there. But this is lots of blocks, and here it is. This is the outside of the block. It is a square. And inside, it's a square and a square. So looking inside the block, this is a 4 patch that you see here. And then again, this is the outside of the block. So you can see this is block after block after block. Now this is a quilt that is made up of, my guess is that these are feed sacks. Just my best guess. This quilt is put together by hand, which often means that it was made in an era where not as many people had sewing machines. You can make a quilt completely by hand. You still can, even though most of us use sewing machines. So there's another lesson that this one teaches us too, and that is about fabric scale. So scale means the size of the prints that are in the fabric. So this one has all florals and they're all pretty much the same size. So again, that takes away any contrast that might have been in this quilt, and there is just zero contrast in this quilt. Whereas if some of those they could have still been florals, but say a calico is a very small scale, would have probably read like a solid color. And then you go all the way to the other spectrum where say a large print, like large florals, you've seen some of them on fabrics that are really big, would have given you a lot of contrast too, because you would have been cutting up that larger piece. But she did not. This is what I always find curious, is that when she started putting the blocks together, it must have been pretty apparent to her a couple of blocks in that there was no contrast, but she kept going anyway. And I actually kind of like that a lot. because she just decided she wanted to make a quilt. She's going to make a quilt, and she made one. Now again, this one is a top. That's how I know that it was done by hand, because I can look at the back and see that it was. And it's put together very well. This person who certainly knew about construction. So this probably wasn't her first quilt. But another lesson that quilts like this teach me when I look at them is that if she had finished this quilt and given it to a family member, they would still love it. Even though we may think there are mistakes because the values are all the same, what we would consider mistakes, they would still love it. And that's a lesson for all of us, that, you know, make your quilts. Don't be afraid that they're not perfect, because it doesn't matter. Your family's going to love them anyway. And probably you're going to love them anyway. Thanks for joining me. And be sure to subscribe to our channel. You can do so here by clicking the subscribe button. That way you'll find out about new videos as they become available.